my grandfather bought this house, there was a big piece of property with it, and enough for several houses.
Wow.
So to the one side of the house, my mother's aunt, no, my mother's sister, my aunt, uh, married before my mother, even though my mother was older. uh, my aunt and uncle then lived next door to us. Now they had two children. My cousin Madeline, who was 7 years older than me, so she was like a big sister to me
Yeah.
growing up, which was very nice. And Bob, well, we call it Bob. He was Robert after his father. Lived next door to me, and he was just a little bit older than me, but within the same year.
Mm.
So they decided they were going to have the two of us go to school together. So I was only 5, and Bobby was, well, 5.5 or so. But we had to walk to school, which was a good long walk. This was quite rural in those days,
Huh.
and we would walk to school, the two of us always, and home from school. And we went, as a matter of fact, we went all through school together. Bobby and me graduated from high school at the same time. And I can remember there was a little pond that we had to pass and go through. And I can know my cousin, he was more adventuresome than I, but he was a year older than I was. Uh, he would have some sort of a raft he would go out on this little pond. We didn't tell his mother that either. Well, my mother. But one day he got wet feet and so forth, and we had to wait long because he wanted to dry up a little bit more. I guess his pants got wet or something. But we never told him. I never went to kindergarten. That's what's wrong with me. See, there was no kindergarten. There was no kindergarten in the school that I would be attending. So I started first grade when I was 5 years old. Yeah, this is everything got pushed back, as far as I'm concerned. Way back then, they were not teaching reading in kindergarten. Kindergarten was more just I think, I don't know, more of a play school idea, I think, to get ready for first grade. So when I started to learn how to read, it was first grade. And we started out with Dick and Jane, the same way that I start teaching. The first couple of years, uh, I went to what was called South Huntington School, and we were there for 3 years. When the school became overcrowded, not what we would consider overcrowded today, but in those days it was. So they sent those of us who lived on the border of two different schools. We were sent to the West Hills School for another year, and by that time, the central school was built, which encompassed grades 5 through high school,
Oh,
which is where I went for all those years.
wow. Did you
So,
walk all those years, or was that a farther distance?
oh well, no, for the 3 years we walked. The fourth year when we went to West Hill School, that was on Jericho Turnpike, which was a road that was not walkable for children. It was too crowded. It was too grown up for us.
Uh-huh.
So we were bused that one year. But when I got to Central School, that was only about a block from where I lived,
Oh.
which was wonderful
Mhm.
because all through the rest of my school in Huntington, I walked because, as a matter of fact, it was across one road, and then there was a lot going through to the next street. We just went through this path, So
Oh,
I could be in school in just a few minutes. I could come home for lunch then. But I guess we had full hours always for lunch back then in those days. Because I guess a lot of people did go home for lunch. And so it was different, quite different from today. When I walked home, I mean, that took me a good half hour or more to walk. Uh, that was the first 3 years, but after that, I was home within 5 to 10 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. We had a path cut through. We kids cut through this path to right to where the high school, where the school was.
wow.
It was
Now, where was Harold going to school at that time?
Harold was, even though he was born in Huntington, it was two different school districts. There was the Huntington district and the South Huntington district. I lived in the South Huntington district, and he went to the Huntington schools.
Ah, okay.
So we never went to schools together there. So he went to kindergarten. I didn't. He was in a different school district, and they had a kindergarten where he was, where he lived. I have a little jar that he painted for his mother in kindergarten. And it was Christmas, and there's a Christmas tree on it. We still have it. The paint was all dripping and so forth. Ah, dear. Now, Harold went, his school was further than mine, but I believe he walked to it. Uh, this was at the other side of town, or not that far. It was just a part of the town. Uh, and he didn't have any busing either. I mean, that was not, there weren't too many people bused in those days. They had a crazy system in those days, so especially in elementary schools. If you did well, they would put you on to the next grade instead of enriching what there was,
Oh,
which so when I got to be in sixth grade, they went a half a year in sixth grade, then they put me on to seventh grade, which was ridiculous. Now the same thing happened to Harold. They did the same thing with him, and that was a different school district.
in the same year?
I'm just trying to remember what year it was they did this with him. It must have been within the sixth, seventh grades.
Huh.
It must have been in those years. Because we ended up at the same time in high school, even though we were going to different high schools.
Yeah.
See, there were no junior highs or middle schools in those days. You went from first grade through eighth in one, except we got skipped through and we missed some part of school. But I was very young and all through school. I graduated from high school at 16, and I was 16 when I graduated, and that's when I went off to college at 16. Now, the same thing happened with Harold, except he was a year older than I was, but he graduated from high school at 17. At the end of 8th grade in those days, they had a graduation exercise where they don't do that today, I know.
Yeah.
Or any, there's no real graduation until after high school today, right?
Yeah. 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 There isn't.
No. So anyway, in my day, they had 8th grade graduation. And with a regular graduation, I mean, everything going on, walking in, getting your diploma, and all that
Yeah.
was on. Now, because there were speeches and whatnot, and as a matter of fact, uh, I talked at my graduation. I was asked to make one of the.
Wow. Were you considered like the valedictorian or?
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't
Okay.
valedictorian. No,
Huh.
but we had a valedictorian and salutatorian,
Huh.
and then they had one or two other speakers. I don't know how they picked them, but anyway,
Wow.
I was picked as one of them to make a speech.
That's
And you know
nice.
what I spoke on? Girl Scouting.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Were you in Girl Scouts then?
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
I was very involved in scouting.
Oh, so were you in Girl Scouts like all the way through elementary school? And
Well, at age 10,
okay,
yeah,
all the way up
scouting
until
began
okay. Oh,
at age 10. Yeah.
okay.
And then I was in scouting through, I guess, till high school anyway.
Yeah.
And so so that's what I talked on when
That's
when I
nice.
graduated and made a speech.
Did you have now, like, do you remember how big of a class you had at that point? Was it how many
uh,
students would you say?
it was like 2 rooms. Uh, let's see. So it must have been about 60 maybe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it didn't enlarge any of that until after high school too.